And trait theories, people talk about quite a lot. Trait theories aren't really focused on the development of personality. They don't really care how or why it's developed. They want to explain what it is after you already have it developed. So they want to measure it and test it and look at the different characteristics of it. And so Alport was one of the first theorists that tried to describe traits. And a trait is just a consistent, enduring way of thinking, feeling, behaving. And it's, like I said, it's consistent within the person's personality, within the person. And so Alport came up with 18,000 different ways to describe traits, or 18,000 different traits. And this is too many, and so they actually narrowed it down to about 200. But Cattell came along and said, 200 is way too many traits. And so he came up with two different types of traits. Either the surface trait, which is seen by other people, it represents the personality characteristics, and other people notice what this trait is, or the source trait, which is the basic trait. It's the underlying trait that impacts the surface trait. So for example, if someone's shy or quiet and they don't like being around crowds, that's going to be the surface trait. But what is impacting that is introversion. So the source trait underneath says, you know what, I like to be quiet, I don't enjoy being around large crowds, and so that is going to come off as shyness, as being quiet, as being more reserved in a public environment. So what Cattell came up with is this factor analysis, and he actually had 16 different source traits, and later they may have added 23, but really mostly they test the 16 source traits. And these are on continuums, and so the opposite ends will be on each side. And so extroversion will be on one side and introversion will be on the other side. And so, or reserved and outgoing would be on opposite ends. And people are somewhere on that line, on that continuum between being reserved and being outgoing. And people aren't generally one way or the other. They're in a range somewhere. Okay, so the 16 factors, some people still thought, you know what, 16 factors is still too many. And so they came up with a 5-factor model. And they call it the Big Five. And so these are the core descriptions of human personality. And these are the only, in the trait theorist's mind, who subscribe to the Big Five, think that these are the only 5 traits that we need to understand to understand what personality is. And so when we look at openness. So openness is the willingness to try new things, to be open to new experiences. So people who don't like change are going to score really low on openness. Conscientious is a person's organization and motivation. So people who score high on this are going to be careful about their time, careful about belongings. People who score low are going to be late to important meetings. They might borrow things and not return them or not take care of them. Extroversion was really first termed by Carl Jung, who was a psychoanalyst. And he believed that people could really divide it into 2 personality types, extroverts and introverts. All people are social creatures. All people need to engage with others at some level. The level is what makes people different. So how much they need to engage with each other impacts whether they're extroverted or introverted. So extroverted people get energy from being around other people. They like to be the center of attention. They like to be active. They like to be involved. They usually have a large group of friends. When someone's introverted, they still have friends. They may have 3 or 4 really good friends. And then if they're around a group of people, they feel they have less energy when they're done. They feel kind of drained after being around other people. They're more quiet, and they do engage socially in small groups. It may feel very awkward in big groups, only because it isn't their comfort level. all people need some sort of engagement with other people because we need that social interaction. It just depends on how much engagement you need and if the person likes to be overly active or not. And then comes agreeableness. So this is talks about an emotional style of the person. Are they easygoing? Are they friendly? Are they pleasant? That's going to be a high end of the scale. If they're grumpy or crabby or hard to get along with, that's going to be at the lower end of the agreeableness scale. And then neuroticism. So this is the emotional stability or instability of the person. Do they excessively worry? Are they overly anxious? Are they moody? They would score high on the neuroticism scale, where people who are even-tempered and calm would score lower on this scale. Now, these 5 traits are not interdependent, so knowing how someone would score on the extroversion scale doesn't impact their agreeableness scale. These are all separate scales to rate people on. And then they came up with the idea that just because we have this trait doesn't mean it's going to present the same in each situation. So the trait situation interaction impacts how we show that. So assume that someone is extroverted and they might talk a lot, they might laugh, they might talk to strangers and tell jokes at a party and engage with others, and they would do this at a party. And however, at a funeral, they would still be open to talking to people, to engaging with strangers, to connecting with other people, but they're not going to be laughing, they're not going to be joking. They're still extroverted, they're still engaging, there's still that trait that's present, but they're doing it and displaying it in an appropriate social way. And so the trait is consistent, but it certainly looks different depending on the situation and the environment. The 5-factor model has been studied numerous times, and really it's consistent across different cultures, such as Japan, the Philippines, Germany, China. But that brings up the question, is it childbearing practices amongst those cultures that impact personality? Is there some genetic component coming into play?